October 15th, 1985. Medellin, Colombia. Maria Sandoval sat in a safe house 3 blocks from Escobar's compound, feeding Griselda Blanco intelligence that would start a war. The DEA file in front of her contained the locations of Pablo's supply routes, his safe houses, his family's movements. Information worth killing for. She picked up the encrypted phone, dialed the number they'd given her for the Black Widow. When Griselda's voice came through the static, cold as death, Maria spoke 6 words that would reshape the cocaine trade forever. Pablo thinks you're stealing from him. What happened in the next 72 hours became legend in the narcotics world. 18 bodies, $5 million in product destroyed, and the beginning of the end for both cartels. The operation the DEA called their greatest success. The operation that Maria Sandoval has spent 38 years trying to forget. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The line went dead, but Maria's hand remained frozen on the receiver. Through the cracked window of the safe house, she could hear the distant thrum of Medellin's nightlife salsa, music bleeding from cantinas. The growl of motorcycles carrying sicarios through narrow streets. The occasional pop of gunfire that might have been fireworks if you didn't know better. She did know better. The intelligence spread across the wooden table like tarot cards predicting death. Surveillance photos of Pablo's warehouses, transcripts of intercepted radio calls, banking records that traced the flow of cocaine money through a dozen shell companies. Each document stamped with the DEA's highest classification level. Each one a potential death sentence if it fell into the wrong hands. Maria had just ensured it would. Her handler, Agent Carter, emerged from the back room where he'd been monitoring the call. His shirt clung to his chest with nervous sweat despite the cool October air. "It's done? It's done." Maria's voice sounded foreign to her own ears, hollow as a confession booth. She bought it completely. Griselda thinks Pablo's been skimming from their joint operations. Carter nodded, but his eyes betrayed the same sick feeling that was crawling up Maria's throat. They were DEA agents, sworn to uphold the law, and they'd just lit a fuse that would burn through Medellin's underworld like napalm. The intelligence community called it strategic disruption. Let the criminals destroy each other while law enforcement watched from the shadows. Maria called it playing God with automatic weapons. "The surveillance teams are in position," Carter said, consulting his watch. "We should see movement within the hour. Griselda's people will hit the warehouse on Calle 45 first. That's where Pablo keeps his weekly shipment from the lab in Tranquilandia." Through the window, Maria watched a black sedan cruise slowly past the safe house. Its windows were tinted dark as midnight, and she couldn't tell if the occupants were Pablo's men, Griselda's, or just another group of players in Medellin's endless game of narco chess. In this city, paranoia wasn't a disorder, it was a survival skill. The radio crackled to life. "Control, this is Overwatch 3. We have movement at target location. Multiple vehicles, armed personnel." Maria closed her eyes and saw the faces in the surveillance photos, young men with gold chains and dead stares. Old enough to kill but too young to understand they were already dead themselves. In 6 hours, half of them would be corpses cooling on concrete floors. The other half would be planning revenge. Control, shots fired. Multiple casualties. It had begun. Carter was speaking into his headset, coordinating with the surveillance team's position throughout the city. His voice carried the clipped efficiency of a man directing a military operation, but Maria caught the tremor underneath. This wasn't a clean takedown with handcuffs and Miranda rights. This was orchestrated chaos, and they were the conductors of a symphony written in blood. Overwatch 2 reports explosion at the warehouse. Structure is compromised. No survivors visible. Maria stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor like fingernails on a coffin lid. She moved to the window and watched smoke rise from the direction of Calle 45, a black column against the Medellin sky that looked like a funeral pyre for the cocaine trade itself. The radio continued its grim play-by-play, vehicle convoy moving toward Escobar compound. Armed confrontation at checkpoint 7. Multiple casualties, requesting backup units. Each report felt like a stone added to the weight pressing down on Maria's chest. She'd analyzed intelligence for 3 years, tracking the flow of drugs and money with the detached precision of an accountant. But tonight, For the first time, she understood the human cost of the numbers in her reports. Control, we have confirmation. Griselda's people hit 3 locations simultaneously. Pablo's losses are significant. Carter approached the window beside her. You did good work tonight, Sandoval. This operation will cripple both organizations. Maria nodded but couldn't find her voice. Through the glass she could see muzzle flashes lighting up the distant neighborhoods like deadly fireflies. Each flash meant someone's son, brother, father was dying in service to the powder that would end up in Miami nightclubs and New York office buildings. The encrypted phone rang again. Maria stared at it, knowing with cold certainty that Griselda Blanco was calling back for more information. The Black Widow had tasted blood and wanted the location of every last drop. "Answer it," Carter commanded. Maria reached for the receiver, her hand steady despite the earthquake in her chest. When she spoke Griselda's name, her voice carried the authority of someone who held life and death in her fingertips. "I have more for you," Maria said into the phone. "Pablo's moving his family tonight. The compound on Avenida El Poblado will be lightly guarded." As she spoke, Maria Sandoval felt something die inside her chest, the part that had once believed, in clean lines between right and wrong. The part that would never come back. Maria watched from the safe house rooftop as orange flames licked the Medellin sky, painting the clouds the color of dried blood. The radio had gone quiet 20 minutes ago. No more reports, no more coordinates, no more body counts delivered in Carter's measured voice. Just the distant wail of sirens and the acrid smell of smoke drifting on the mountain wind. She pulled her jacket tighter against the October chill and tried to count how many lies she'd told tonight. To Griselda, to Pablo's people when she'd fed them false intelligence about Griselda's next move. To herself when she'd believed this was just another operation, clean and surgical as the briefings had promised. The compound where Pablo's family had been staying, the one she'd marked for death with a single phone call, was dark now. Intelligence reports would later confirm that Pablo had moved his wife and children 12 hours before the attack, but Maria wouldn't learn that for another 3 months. Tonight, staring at the smoke, she carried the weight of believing she'd orchestrated the murder of innocents. "Sandoval," Carter's voice came from behind her. "We need to debrief." She didn't turn around. "How many?" 43 confirmed, maybe more when they finished counting. 43 lives she'd helped end with classified intelligence and carefully crafted lies. Maria closed her eyes and saw her father's face the proud smile when she'd graduated from Georgetown. The way he'd called her Mia and said she was going to change the world. He'd been a beat cop in El Paso for 30 years, believed in justice like other men believed in God. He'd never asked how she changed the world, only that she did it with honor. "The operation exceeded all projections," Carter continued. "Both organizations are crippled. We're looking at the collapse of the largest cocaine distribution network in history." Maria finally faced him. In the pre-dawn light, Carter looked older than his 45 years, gray stubble and hollow eyes that had seen too much. And the cost? Acceptable losses. These weren't choir boys, Maria. Every one of them had blood on their hands. She wanted to believe him, needed to believe him. But when she closed her eyes, all she could see were the muzzle flashes in the distance, each one marking a moment when someone's world ended forever. The encrypted radio crackled once more. "All units, operation complete. Begin extraction protocol." Within 6 hours, Maria was on a military transport to Bogota, then a commercial flight to Miami with a passport that wasn't quite her real name. The DEA would debrief her for 2 weeks in a sterile conference room that smelled like industrial coffee and moral compromise. They'd tell her the operation was a complete success, that her intelligence work had dealt a decisive blow to the Colombian cartels. They wouldn't tell her about the nightmares that would follow her for decades, the faces she'd never seen but couldn't forget, the weight of 43 souls that would settle into her chest like stones in deep water. Or that 15 years later she'd be standing in a kitchen in coastal Oregon, scrambling eggs for her adopted daughter while trying to forget the night she'd played God in Medellin. The morning sun was already warming the windows of her small house when the memory finally released its grip. Maria blinked, returning to the present, to Sophia's voice drifting down from upstairs, to the smell of coffee brewing, to the life she'd built from the ashes of who she used to be. "Mom?" Sophia appeared in the doorway, 18 and beautiful with dark eyes that held nothing but trust. "You okay? You were just standing there." Maria forced a smile, the same one she'd practiced in witness protection for 15 years. Just thinking about breakfast. You want extra cheese in your eggs? Sophia grinned, the scholarship letter still clutched in her hand like a winning lottery ticket. The letter that had arrived yesterday, offering her a full ride to Columbia University from the Esperanza Foundation, a foundation Maria had spent half the night researching with growing dread. "I can't believe this is real," Sophia said, bouncing on her toes. "Columbia, Mom. I'm going to study journalism at Columbia University." The irony wasn't lost on Maria. Her daughter wanted to uncover truth for a living, while Maria had spent the last 15 years burying it. She reached for the coffee pot with steady hands, though inside her chest something was stirring, an old instinct that tasted like copper and fear. The Esperanza Foundation had no public records before 2010, no board members listed, no physical address beyond a P.O. box in Miami. But their letter to Sophia had been delivered to this house, to this name, in this small Oregon town where nobody was supposed to know who Maria Sandoval really was. Someone knew, someone remembered. And they were calling in a debt that was 38 years overdue. Maria stared at the pan where yellow curds had turned brown at the edges, the smell of scorched protein filling her kitchen like an accusation. Sophia was still talking about Columbia, about dorm rooms and professors and the future stretching ahead of her like an open highway. But Maria's mind had gone elsewhere, to a secure phone line in Bogotá, to the voice of her former handler speaking words that would change everything. She turned off the burner with hands that had forgotten how to tremble. "I'll make fresh ones," she said, scraping the ruined eggs into the disposal. The grinding sound reminded her of other things being destroyed, ground down until nothing recognizable remained. The phone rang. Both women froze. In 15 years of witness protection, Maria's landline had become a monument to silence. Sophia's friends called her cell. The town's few businesses had her mobile number. The only people who called the house phone were telemarketers, and it rang again. "I'll get it," Sophia said, reaching for the receiver. "No." The word came out sharper than Maria intended. Sophia's hand stopped mid-air, confusion flickering across her features. "I mean, it's probably just a robocall. Let the machine get it." But Maria's answering machine had been disconnected for 3 years. Sophia knew this. The phone rang a third time, and in that electronic trill, Maria heard the echo of another phone in another life, the encrypted line that had carried Griselda Blanco's voice across the bloody streets of Medellin. "Mom?" Sophia's voice carried a note Maria had never heard before. Suspicion. "What's wrong?" The fourth ring died mid-tone as whoever was calling hung up. Maria's chest felt hollow, like a house after the furniture's been removed. She turned back to the stove, cracking new eggs into the pan with mechanical precision. "Nothing's wrong, Mia. Just tired." But something was wrong. Everything was wrong. The scholarship letter lay on the counter like evidence at a crime scene, and Maria could feel the weight of its implications settling around her shoulders like a shroud. Someone had found her. Someone who knew that Elena Rodriguez of Sunset Bay, Oregon, was really Maria Sandoval, former DEA intelligence analyst, architect of cartel destruction, the woman who had whispered death sentences into encrypted phones. The eggs sizzled in fresh butter. Sophia sat at the kitchen table, her excitement about Columbia dimmed by the strange tension that had invaded their morning. She was studying her mother's face with the intensity of someone trying to solve a puzzle. "The foundation," Sophia said slowly. "You looked them up last night, didn't you?" Maria's hands stilled on the spatula. Of course, any parent would research a scholarship program. And what? And what did you find? Sophia's voice carried the persistence that would serve her well as a journalist, the same quality that terrified Maria now. "You've been acting weird since that letter arrived, like you've seen a ghost." The words hit closer than Sophia could possibly know. Maria had seen ghosts, 43 of them, rising from the smoke of burning warehouses and shattered safe houses. She'd been living with ghosts for 15 years, and now one of them had reached across decades to touch her new life with blood-stained fingers. She flipped the eggs with steady hands. "I found what any parent would find. A generous foundation offering opportunities to deserving students. Nothing more." But Sophia was 18 and sharp as her mother had been at that age before the DEA, before Medellin, before the night she'd learned that justice could taste like ashes in your mouth. Then why won't you look at me? Maria turned, meeting her daughter's eyes with the same practiced calm she'd used to lie to cartel leaders. I'm looking at you. You're looking through me, like you used to when I was little and asked about my birth parents. The comparison drew blood. Sophia had stopped asking about her biological family years ago, accepting Maria's vague explanations about records lost in bureaucratic shuffles and adoption agencies that had closed down. Now those same evasions were surfacing again, and Sophia was old enough to recognize the pattern. The phone rang again. This time Maria moved toward it with the deliberate pace of someone walking to their execution. She'd spent 15 years running from her past, building a life from careful lies and manufactured normalcy. But as her hand closed around the receiver, she understood with crystal clarity that the running was over. Someone had been patient, someone had been watching. Someone had waited 15 years to deliver a message wrapped in the promise of her daughter's future. Hello? Her voice carried none of the fear crawling up her throat. Silence. Then a woman's voice, accented with the musical cadence of coastal Colombia. Buenos dias, Maria. We need to talk. The line went dead, but the words hung in the air like smoke from a distant fire. Maria set the receiver down with infinite care, knowing that the woman she'd been for the last 15 years, Elena Rodriguez, small-town single mother, quiet neighbor who kept to herself, had just died as surely as if someone had put a bullet in her brain. Sophia was staring at her with wide eyes. Mom, who was that? Maria looked at her daughter, the only pure thing in a life built on compromise and blood, and felt her carefully constructed world begin to collapse. Pack a bag, she said quietly. We're leaving. Now. Maria was already moving, her body operating on instincts carved deep by years of DEA training. She pulled the cast-iron skillet off the burner and turned off the stove, the eggs forgotten and cooling. Just do what I say. Pack light only what you need. I'm not going anywhere until you explain. Sophia. The tone cut through her daughter's protests like a blade. It was a voice Sophia had never heard before, cold, authoritative, dangerous. The voice of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. Pack, now. Sophia flinched but didn't move. You're scaring me. Good, Maria thought. Scared keeps you alive. But she couldn't say that. Couldn't explain that the Colombian accent on the phone had carried the weight of 38 corpses and 15 years of borrowed time. The landline rang again. Maria stared at it, counting the rings. On the fourth, her neighbor's voice drifted through the thin walls, Mrs. Chen calling for her cat. Normal sounds from a normal morning in a normal life that was dissolving like sugar in acid. Don't answer it, she whispered. Sophia was backing toward the kitchen doorway, her face pale. Mom, you're really freaking me out. Who was that woman? Why did she call you Maria? The question hung between them like a loaded gun. Maria had rehearsed dozens of cover stories over the years, wrong numbers, mistaken identity, old friends from college. But standing in her kitchen with her daughter's trust cracking like ice beneath her feet, she found herself wordless. Footsteps on the front porch. Maria's blood turned to winter. She moved to the window, careful to stay back from the glass, and peered through the corner of the curtain. A black sedan sat in her driveway, expensive, clean, with tinted windows that reflected the morning sky like dark mirrors. Two figures stood on her porch, a man in his 50s wearing a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and a woman with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun. The woman raised her hand to knock. Back door, Maria whispered. Go out the back door and keep walking until you reach the tree line. Don't look back. I'm not leaving you. Sophia, listen to me very carefully. Maria turned from the window, and something in her expression made Sophia take another step backward. There are things about my life before you were born, things I can never explain. But right now, the only thing that matters is keeping you safe. The knock came, 3 measured raps that seemed to echo through the house like gunshots. Sophia's eyes were wide and bright with unshed tears. This is about the scholarship, isn't it? About the foundation. Maria nodded slowly. Someone wants to have a conversation I've been avoiding for 15 years. Then we call the police. A bitter laugh escaped Maria's throat. The police can't help with this. Another knock, more insistent. Mrs. Rodriguez? The man's voice carried a slight accent, Venezuelan, maybe Colombian. We just want to talk. Maria closed her eyes, and felt the weight of every decision that had led to this moment. The intelligence she'd fed to Griselda Blanco, the warehouse coordinates, the compound where Pablo's family was supposed to be sleeping. Each choice had seemed justified at the time, necessary for the greater good. Now they'd crystallized into this moment strangers on her porch who knew her real name and wanted to discuss old debts. "There's a gun," she whispered to Sophia, "taped under the kitchen sink. If something happens, stop." Sophia's voice cracked. "Just stop. You're my mom. You make scrambled eggs and worry about my curfew and cry at Hallmark movies. You don't have guns taped under sinks." But Maria was already kneeling, her fingers finding the familiar shape of the Glock 19 she'd hidden there 5 years ago. The metal was cold against her palm, heavier than memory suggested. She checked the magazine's 17 rounds, one in the chamber. Muscle memory guided her movements as she engaged the safety and tucked the weapon into the waistband of her jeans. "Mrs. Rodriguez, we know you're in there," the woman's voice this time, carrying the same Colombian accent from the phone. "We're not here to hurt anyone. We just want to discuss your daughter's future." Sophia made a small sound, half gasp, half sob. "They know about the scholarship." Maria pulled her daughter close, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, something clean and innocent that belonged to the life they were about to lose. "Whatever happens, you are not responsible for my choices. Do you understand? None of this is your fault." The front door handle turned. Maria's blood froze. She'd locked that door, had checked it twice before going to bed, the same ritual she'd performed every night for 15 years. But the handle was turning, smooth and deliberate, as if someone had simply produced the right key. Professional, organized, patient. Exactly like the people who'd taught her that some conversations couldn't be avoided forever. "Please don't," the woman said, noting Maria's position. "We really are just here to talk." Behind her, the man filled the doorway like a well-dressed wall. His eyes swept the kitchen with professional assessment, cataloging exits and angles of fire. When his gaze settled on Sophia, his expression softened almost imperceptibly. "She has her father's eyes," the woman observed, stepping deeper into Maria's kitchen without invitation. "Carlos always had such beautiful eyes. It's a shame he never got to see her grow up." Sophia's sharp intake of breath cut through the room like breaking glass. "My father? You knew my—" "Sophia, don't!" Maria's voice carried 15 years of buried panic. "Don't say anything." But the damage was spreading like cracks in a windshield. The woman smiled with the satisfaction of someone who just played a winning card. "She doesn't know, does she? About Carlos Herrera, about how he died trying to protect her mother's identity." Her accent grew thicker, more pronounced. "About how Maria Sandoval traded his life for information." The words hit Maria like physical blows. She'd spent 15 years constructing elaborate lies about Sophia's parentage adoption agencies, anonymous birth parents, paperwork lost in bureaucratic shuffles. The truth was simpler and infinitely more devastating. Carlos had been her asset, her lover, and finally her sacrifice on the altar of operational necessity. "You're lying." Sophia's voice wavered between hope and growing horror. "Carlos Herrera," the woman continued relentlessly, "worked for the Cali Cartel's financial division. Money laundering primarily, but he also handled communications between the cartels and certain American intelligence assets. He was very good at his job. Too good, perhaps." Maria's chest felt hollow. She could see Carlos's face in her memory, earnest and intelligent, with the same dark eyes that looked back at her from Sophia's reflection every morning. He'd trusted her completely, even when she'd asked him to deliver information that would doom his friends. "He fell in love with an analyst," the woman said, settling into Maria's kitchen chair as if she owned it. "A brilliant woman who convinced him that he was working for peace, for an end to the violence. He believed her when she said the intelligence he provided would save lives." Sophia turned to stare at her mother with dawning comprehension. "The analyst was you." It wasn't a question. Maria nodded slowly, feeling the last of Elena Rodriguez's comfortable lies crumble to ash. "Yes. And my father, Carlos. He died because of what you made him do." The woman answered before Maria could find words. "He died because Pablo Escobar's people discovered he'd been feeding information to the Americans. They found him 3 days after the Medellin warehouse raids. What they did to him—" She paused delicately. "Well, the details aren't suitable for family breakfast conversation." Sophia's legs seemed to give out. She sank into the chair across from the woman, her face drained of color. "You're saying my father was tortured to death. Because of her. I'm saying your father was a casualty of a war your mother helped orchestrate, along with 42 others that night." The woman's voice carried the weight of an epitaph. "Though I suspect Maria never mentioned that particular body count to you either." The kitchen felt smaller now, as if the walls were contracting with each revelation. Maria found herself backed against the counter, the weight of the Glock pressing against her spine like a reminder of other times, other choices. "What do you want?" Her voice sounded foreign to her own ears. "Justice," the woman said simply. "Though I suspect you've forgotten what that looks like." The man by the door shifted slightly, and Maria caught a glimpse of shoulder holster beneath his jacket. Professional, patient, prepared. They'd been planning this confrontation for years, maybe decades. "The scholarship," Sophia whispered. "It was never real, was it?" "Oh, the scholarship is quite real," the woman assured her. "Columbia University, full ride, everything is advertised." "You're a remarkable young woman, Sofia Herrera. Your father would have been very proud." The use of Sophia's real surname, the one she'd never known, seemed to physically wound her. She doubled over slightly, as if someone had struck her in the stomach. "You see," the woman continued, "the Esperanza Foundation specializes in providing opportunities to children orphaned by the drug wars. We've helped hundreds over the years, children whose parents died in raids, in cartel violence, in the crossfire of American operations." Her eyes found Maria's. Children like Sophia, whose fathers paid the ultimate price for trusting the wrong people. Maria understood now. The scholarship wasn't bait, it was a message. "We know who you are, we know what you did, and we know exactly how to hurt you." 15 years, the woman murmured. "We've been watching you build this pretty little life, raise Carlos's daughter as your own, pretend the past doesn't exist, but ghosts don't stay buried forever, do they, Maria?" "You want justice," Maria said slowly, "for Carlos, for the others, among other things." The woman's smile never wavered, but something predatory flickered behind her eyes. "You destroyed so many lives that night in Medellin, families torn apart, children orphaned, an entire network of people who were just trying to survive in an impossible situation." Sophia looked up from her chair, tears streaming down her face. "How many people died because of what you did?" Maria felt the question like a blade between her ribs. She'd carried those names for 15 years, memorized every face from the intelligence photos. 43 confirmed. Confirmed. The woman laughed, but there was no humor in it. Such clinical language, as if they were chess pieces instead of human beings. "They were criminals," Maria said, but the words tasted like ash. "Drug dealers, murderers. Were they?" The woman leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Was Carlos a murderer, Maria? Was the 19-year-old courier who died in Warehouse 7 the accountant's wife who happened to be visiting the wrong safe house that night?" Each name was a weight added to Maria's chest, making it harder to breathe. She'd told herself for years that the operation had been clean, surgical, that the casualties had been justified by the greater good. But sitting in her kitchen with Sophia's broken trust bleeding between them, those justifications felt as fragile as paper in rain. "I did what I had to do," she whispered. "No." Sophia's voice cut through the room like breaking glass. "You did what you wanted to do. There's a difference." The words hit harder than any physical blow. Maria turned to look at her daughter, this girl she'd raised, loved, protected, and saw only condemnation in those dark eyes that carried Carlos's ghost. "You don't understand the situation I was in," Maria began. "Then explain it." Sophia stood up, her hands clenched into fists. "Explain how getting my father killed was the right thing to do. Explain how lying to me for 18 years was protecting me. Explain how you sleep at night knowing that 43 people died because of your choices." Maria opened her mouth, but no words came. How could she explain the impossible mathematics of that operation? The intelligence that suggested Pablo's network was planning attacks on American soil, the pressure from Washington to end the cartel wars by any means necessary. The way Carlos had looked at her the last time they spoke, trusting and hopeful, believing he was helping build a better world. "She can't explain," the woman said gently, her voice carrying false sympathy. "Because there is no explanation that doesn't make her a monster." That's enough. Maria's hand moved toward her weapon, but stopped as the man by the door shifted slightly. She could feel the tactical balance of the room, two professionals against one, with Sofia caught in the crossfire. The same kind of calculation she'd made in Medellin, weighing lives against objectives. Is it enough? The woman's eyebrows rose. Because I don't think Sofia has heard the best part yet. She turned to face the girl directly. Would you like to know why your mother really agreed to help us that night? Why she was so eager to feed information to Griselda Blanco? Stop! Maria's voice cracked like a whip, but the woman continued as if she hadn't spoken. It wasn't patriotism or duty or any noble cause. It was revenge. Pure and simple. Pablo's people had killed her partner, her real partner, the one before Carlos. A DEA agent named David Chen who got too close to the truth. The kitchen floor seemed to tilt beneath Maria's feet. David's name hadn't been spoken aloud in 15 years, but it still carried the power to hollow out her chest. She could see his face in her memory, laughing at something she'd said over breakfast in Bogotá. 3 days later, his body had been found in pieces. You wanted Pablo to suffer, the woman continued relentlessly. So you orchestrated the perfect trap. You made Carlos fall in love with you, convinced him to betray his own people, and then watched as both cartels tore themselves apart in the aftermath. 43 people died not for justice or peace, but because Maria Sandoval wanted revenge. Sofia's face had gone white as bone. Is that true? Maria looked at her daughter and felt the last of her defenses crumble. Yes. The admission hung in the air like a gunshot echo. Sofia staggered backward, her hand finding the counter for support. The woman smiled with the satisfaction of someone who'd just delivered a killing blow. You see, she said to Sofia, your mother isn't a hero or a patriot. She's just a woman who let grief turn her into something monstrous. But Sofia wasn't looking at the woman anymore. Her eyes were fixed on Maria with an expression that cut deeper than hatred. You made him love you. My father. You made him love you so you could use him. Sofia, and then you took me, raised me, pretended to care. Sofia's voice broke. Was any of it real? Did you ever actually love me, or was I just another part of your cover story? The question shattered something fundamental inside Maria's chest. She reached toward her daughter, but Sofia flinched away as if her touch carried poison. Of course I love you, Maria whispered. You're the only real thing in my life. Touching, the woman said, standing from her chair. But I'm afraid love isn't enough to balance the scales. Maria felt something fracture inside her chest, a sound like ice breaking on deep water. She'd asked herself the same question 1,000 times, watching Sofia sleep in those early months, wondering if love could ever balance the scales of betrayal. You don't know anything about what happened after, Maria said, but her voice sounded hollow even to herself. Don't I? The woman turned from the window, and for the first time, Maria caught something familiar in her profile, a ghost of recognition that made her stomach lurch. I know you found Sofia in a Bogotá orphanage 3 months after her father's execution. I know you used your connections to expedite the adoption paperwork. I know you changed your name and disappeared into witness protection with a child who had no idea her new mother was responsible for making her an orphan. Sofia made a sound like a wounded animal. Orphanage? Your grandmother couldn't care for you, the woman explained with clinical precision. Carlos's mother, Elena Herrera, she was 73, diabetic, barely surviving on a pension. When her son was murdered, she had no choice but to surrender his infant daughter to the state. Maria closed her eyes, remembering the smell of disinfectant and despair that had clung to the orphanage walls. Sofia had been 8 months old, crying in a metal crib, her dark eyes Carlos's eyes tracking movement with an intelligence that broke Maria's heart. She told herself she was saving the child, giving her opportunities, creating something good from the wreckage of what she'd destroyed. Elena Herrera died 6 years ago, the woman continued, alone, never knowing what happened to her granddaughter, never understanding why the little girl she'd been forced to surrender had simply vanished into the American system. Stop, Sofia whispered. Please, just stop. But the revelations kept coming, relentless as artillery. Would you like to know who I am, Sofia? Why I've spent 15 years tracking your mother across 3 states and 2 identities. Maria's blood turned to ice water. She stared at the woman's profile, at the aristocratic nose and the way she held her shoulders, and suddenly the recognition crystallized into certainty. "You're Elena," Maria breathed. "Carlos's mother." The woman Elena Herrera smiled with bitter satisfaction. "Very good. Though it took you longer than I expected." She turned to face Sofia directly. "Hello, granddaughter. I've been looking for you for a very long time." Sofia's legs gave out completely. She sank to the floor, her back against the cabinets, staring at the woman who claimed to be family she'd never known existed. "You're lying. You're both lying. My grandmother is dead." "My mother told me." She stopped, her eyes wide with the realization that everything Maria had ever told her about their past was suspect. "Your mother told you many things," Elena said gently, "most of them designed to keep you from asking difficult questions about where you came from." Maria felt the weight of 15 years of careful lies collapsing around her. Every bedtime story about anonymous adoption agencies, every deflection when Sofia asked about her birth parents, every moment of manufactured history designed to bury the truth under layers of comfortable fiction. The cancer was a gift. In a way, Elena continued conversationally. Terminal diagnosis, 6 months to live. It clarified priorities wonderfully, made me realize I couldn't die without seeing my granddaughter again, without her knowing the truth about who she really is. The man by the door shifted slightly, and Maria caught the way his eyes tracked between Elena and Sofia with something that might have been sympathy. Professional muscle, but not without conscience. "So you created the scholarship," Maria said, understanding finally clicking into place. "The foundation, all of it to draw us out." "The Esperanza Foundation is real," Elena corrected. "We've helped dozens of children orphaned by the drug wars. Children whose parents died in operations just like yours." Her voice hardened. It seemed fitting that Carlos's daughter should benefit from an organization dedicated to helping victims of American intelligence operations. Sofia looked up from the floor, her face streaked with tears. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing you're not willing to give," Elena said, kneeling beside her granddaughter with surprising grace for her age. "I want you to know who your father really was. I want you to understand the family you come from, and I want you to make your own choices about what happens next." "What happens next?" Sofia's voice was barely a whisper. Elena's eyes found Maria's across the kitchen. "That depends on your mother, on whether she's finally ready to face the consequences of what she did in Medellin." Maria felt the moment crystallizing around her like cooling metal. 15 years of running, of hiding, of building a life on foundations of lies and good intentions. It was ending here, in her kitchen, with Carlos's mother and Carlos's daughter and the weight of 43 ghosts pressing down like the sky before a storm. "What do you want?" Maria asked. Elena Herrera smiled. "Justice, finally." "Justice," Maria repeated. "What does that look like to you?" Elena's smile held no warmth. "Truth, complete and public acknowledgement of what you did, the real story of Operation Magdalena, not the sanitized version in some classified file cabinet. You want me to confess?" Maria felt the familiar weight of calculation, the tactical assessment that had once been second nature. "To what end?" "The statute of limitations." "There are no limitations on some crimes," Elena interrupted. "And some debts transcend legal frameworks." Sofia struggled to her feet, her face raw with tears but her voice steady. "What about what I want?" Both women turned to look at her, and Maria felt something shift in the room's dynamics. The girl, no, the young woman, who had been the prize in this confrontation, was claiming her own agency. "I want to know everything," Sofia said. "Not your version, Mom. Not your version either," she added to Elena. "I want the truth, all of it, and then I want to decide for myself what justice means." Elena nodded approvingly. Spoken like Carlos's daughter, the comparison hit Maria like a physical blow. She could see Carlos in Sofia's stance, in the way she faced down uncomfortable truth rather than running from it. The courage that had made him trust her, and that had ultimately killed him. "The truth," Maria said slowly, "is that I was 28 years old and broken by grief when I conceived Operation Magdalena. David's death, my partner's murder, it hollowed me out, made me capable of things I'd never imagined." Elena's expression flickered with something that might have been sympathy. "Go on." "I identified Carlos through our intelligence network. Financial analyst, Smart, idealistic, someone who believed in peace more than loyalty to any particular cartel. Maria's voice caught. I seduced him, systematically. Made him fall in love with a woman who was using his feelings as a weapon. Sophia closed her eyes but didn't turn away. But somewhere in the process, Maria continued. Something changed. Carlos's belief in building something better, it infected me. I started to think maybe the operation could actually create positive change. That the end would justify the means. Until it didn't, Elena said quietly. Until 43 people died in a single night, and I realized I'd become exactly the kind of monster I thought I was fighting. Maria's hands were shaking now. Carlos died 3 days later because someone in Pablo's organization figured out where the intelligence leak was coming from. They tortured him for hours before killing him. The kitchen was silent except for the steady tick of the wall clock, a sound that had comforted Maria for 5 years, but now felt like a countdown to judgment. I found Sophia in the orphanage by tracking down Carlos's family records, Maria said. Elena had already surrendered her because she couldn't afford medical care, couldn't provide the life a child deserved. I told myself I was saving her, giving her opportunities. You were stealing her, Elena said, but without the venom Maria expected. Taking the last piece of my son. Sophia opened her eyes, looking between the two women who had shaped her life through their choices and deceptions. Did you love my father? The question was directed at Maria, and it carried the weight of 18 years of unasked questions. Yes, Maria whispered. Not at first, but by the end, yes, completely. Which made what I was doing to him even more unforgivable. Elena made a soft sound, almost like surprise. He knew. Maria's head snapped up. What? In his last letter to me, before he died. Carlos knew you were using him. He'd figured it out. Elena's voice carried an old grief, worn smooth by years but still sharp enough to cut. But he loved you anyway, believed he could change you, save you from whatever darkness was driving you to such extremes. The revelation hit Maria like a collapsing building. 15 years of guilt over Carlos's naive trust, and he'd known all along. Had chosen love over safety, hope over survival. Sophia was crying again, but silently now. He died knowing you'd betrayed him, but loving you anyway. Yes. Elena reached for Sophia's hand. That was your father, foolishly, beautifully optimistic about human nature. Maria felt something break open inside her chest, not the clean snap of breaking bone, but the messy rupture of an old wound finally draining. What do you want from me, Elena? What would constitute justice for Carlos? Elena studied her for a long moment. Help me finish his work. I don't understand. The Esperanza Foundation. The children orphaned by operations like yours. Carlos believed broken things could be repaired, that people could choose to build instead of destroy. Elena's voice strengthened. Help me prove he was right. The foundation needs someone with your skills, Elena continued quietly. Someone who understands how intelligence networks operate, how to trace the children who disappear into systems after their parents are killed in operations like Magdalena. Someone who knows how to navigate the bureaucracies that swallow orphans whole. Sophia wiped her tears with the back of her hand, her voice hoarse. You want her to help find other kids like me? Kids whose parents died because of decisions made in Washington boardrooms and Langley briefing rooms. Elena nodded. Children who deserve better than growing up believing lies about where they came from. Maria felt the offer settle around her like a weight she might choose to carry. 15 years of running, of hiding, of building walls between herself and the consequences of what she'd done. Elena was offering something different, not absolution, but purpose. The chance to balance scales that could never truly be balanced. I can't undo Carlos's death, Maria said. No, Elena agreed. But you can honor his life. The kitchen brightened as morning sun finally crested the coastal hills, casting long shadows across the floor where Sophia sat. Maria watched light transform her daughter's face, Carlos's eyes, Elena's stubborn jaw, but something uniquely her own in the way she processed this impossible situation. I want to help, Sophia said suddenly. Whatever you decide, I want to be part of it. Elena smiled, the first genuine warmth Maria had seen from her. Your father would be proud of that choice. Would he? Sophia's question carried years of wondering about the man she'd never known. Really? Carlos believed people could choose to be better than their circumstances, Elena said. That love could overcome even the worst betrayals. He would see your strength and know that something good came from all the pain. Maria closed her eyes, remembering Carlos's voice on that last phone call before Medellin, excited about plans for peace negotiations, believing they were building a future where children wouldn't grow up surrounded by violence. He'd been naive, perhaps, but his optimism had been genuine, infectious, the reason she'd fallen in love with him despite herself. The work won't be easy, Elena warned. These children, they're scattered across institutions, foster systems, adoption agencies that don't communicate with each other. Some have been missing for years. Others are hidden deliberately by people who profit from keeping families separated. I know how those systems work, Maria said slowly. How to trace records, how to navigate bureaucracies that don't want to be navigated. And I know computers, Sophia added. Database searches, social media tracking, digital forensics, things they didn't have when you were doing this kind of work. Elena looked between them, the woman who had destroyed her family, and the granddaughter who might help rebuild something from the wreckage. Together you might actually make a difference. The word together hung in the air between Maria and Sophia, fragile as spun glass. 18 years of shared life, of bedtime stories and scraped knees and homework arguments, suddenly reframed by knowledge of how it had all begun. I need time, Sophia said finally, to process all of this, to figure out what it means. Of course, Elena stood, her movements betraying the pain she carried. I'm not asking for immediate decisions. The cancer gives me perhaps 3 months. Enough time to show you both what we've already built, introduce you to the children we've helped. Maria watched her daughter's face, saw the careful consideration that had always marked Sophia's major decisions. She was Carlos's child in that deliberation, weighing consequences, seeking understanding before action. One question, Sophia said to Elena, did you come here for revenge or for this? Elena paused at the threshold, her hand on the doorframe. I came here to find my granddaughter before I died. Everything else, she glanced at Maria. Everything else depends on choices we all make going forward. After Elena and her silent companion left, Maria and Sophia sat together in the brightening kitchen, surrounded by the debris of secrets finally spoken aloud. The comfortable fiction of their life lay in pieces around them. But something new was taking shape in the spaces between truth and possibility. I'm angry, Sophia said quietly. At you, at him, at all of it. I know. But I also understand why you made the choices you did. Not agree with them, but understand them. Maria nodded, feeling the terrible relief of being truly seen for the first time in 15 years. What happens now? Sophia looked out the window toward the ocean, where morning light turned the waves to molten silver. Now we figure out how to live with the truth. And maybe, if we're very careful and very lucky, we find a way to honor the people we've lost by helping the people we can still save. Outside, the Oregon coast stretched endlessly toward horizons that had once seemed like barriers, but now looked like possibilities.